I'm not actually chairing the session. My colleague Vincent Solomon is. So, but I thought we'd bring this back to order and let's see if we can go get our conversation going. And so, are there questions for Joe or comments or responses? I got one, by the way. Technical. There was a school in Norway House, a residential school, and you didn't go there. You came down to Port of the Prairie. Why was that?
Well, I finished grade 7, and I didn't go to residential school. At Norway House, when I grew up, there was a United Church residential school. There was a Roman Catholic residential school. There was a United Church day school on the reserve. There was an Anglican day school, and there were a lot more schools. And there was a Roman Catholic day school, and then there was a public school.
Oh my goodness!
And I went to the public school. At the public school, there were white kids, and there were non-treaty kids. There were no Métis at that time. At least the term Métis was not used at that time. Non-treaty kids, and there were treaty kids. And it was the handiest school to my home. So that's where I went. And it was a little log schoolhouse type of thing.
Was there any teaching in Cree?
No.
Well,
there's no teaching in Cree today, very little. We try to teach Cree. Cree, Indian languages, indigenous languages. Anyway, Indian languages are disappearing at a rapid rate. And it's because Indian people live in very small communities. They're not homogeneous communities. Even in Quebec, which is a large homogeneous community, they had trouble keeping French. They had passed a special act, French alive, and other countries like the Maori in New Zealand, they're also homogeneous. But here you have 635 different communities speaking about 20 different languages, so it's very difficult. There's a few reserves that are managing to keep the language alive. One is, I would say, in Cross Lake. Cross Lake is, and it was a concentrated effort. I was going to say consecrated. Concentrated effort by the people there. And I've heard that the Cumberland House in Saskatchewan is not continue to speak Cree like that. But in many places, the outside, especially television, it's really had a real impact. When I worked in, I remember in 1962 going up to Triple Eight. Everyone spoke Cree there. Kids now, today, half the people, 3/4 of the people don't speak Cree anymore. And a lot of young people, they don't. So they're trying to teach it. The other thing that I wanted to do when we talk about Cree, James Evans, with the help of Indian people, created Cree syllabics at Norway House in 1840. But in a lot of these places where they're teaching Cree, they don't use the syllabics. They're using Roman orthography, the Roman alphabet, to write Cree words, when it's so simple to use the Cree syllabics, because it was created for the Cree language. Like I read and write Cree. My mother was fluent in both languages, of course, but she could also write Cree. But she always said that, that you could learn the Cree writing in a week. And in the early 20th century, the Cree in the north were the most literate people in the world, because everyone could read and write Cree. The older people would teach their children. Now, very few older people read and write Cree. but yet that language is, that syllabics are right there. And I often think, you know, like Japanese language, they really, they use their own alphabet. Why can't we do that? Anyway, but that's another.
Paul?
Just a comment on that, I think we should ensure that all federal and provincial politicians learn an Indigenous language. That might help. You know, it would also help the cultural stuff, I would guess.
Once they find out how difficult it is.
How painful it is to listen to.
But it's great fun when we make mistakes.
Chris, can I ask you, is it possible to do something with that?
Well, not really, because of the, yeah, it was a,
What was that?
Better than me, and it's probably worse for some other people.
Okay, there. No, and I don't have to look at him anymore.
Thank you.
I can still talk around here.
Oh, yeah, you're tall enough.
I'm curious, Mr. Keeper, how you respond to the TV programs that are on about Indigenous and Native cultures. And I watch some of them a little bit, and I don't find them particularly uplifting. They seem to treat the Aboriginal people very poorly on a lot of TV shows. Do you think that's the case?
I thought you were in those, Tina.
Are you talking about first contact? Are you talking about something like first contact?
I mean, there's different kinds of shows.
Yeah, like, funny, I'm going to tell a story about that.
Some of them are.
We enjoy it here. When we lived in Winnipeg when my kids were small, still, and they used to watch TV, the Indian cowboys. And my kids were sitting in the back, and Joy was about 4 years older than him. My other boy, my son, two sons, the second son was, I guess he'd be seven, right?
Yeah.
And they were talking about Indian cowboys. And we're talking about being Indian people, you know. And Joyce said, no, I'm not an Indian person. That's, you know, going to school there and the fact of TV and just general implicit bias that I'm talking about. Anyway, she said, no, I don't look. And Barry said, afterwards, and Barry said, well, what do you want to be then? A cowboy? So that was there were cowboys and Indians. I'm sorry. But you're right. I mean, that was, there's not that many, but my daughter here has been involved in that.
I knew that person was
In
famous.
the film business a while ago. Maybe she can have a comment.
I think that one of the, I mean, I'm a producer, so I know that one of the challenges with the implicit bias, you know, I mean, even if you look at CBC, for instance, we did North of 60 in 1992. Like, and they have not had a television series in all these years with a predominantly Native cast. So it really speaks to like what the public broadcaster thinks and what they believe and how little belief they have in, you know, Indigenous creators. So I think that you're right. Like there's a particular lens that's filtering what you're seeing and what you're hearing, and I think that on some television, I mean, I don't even have cable. Like I don't even watch television very much because I'm just not interested in like these really old-fashioned narratives about who we are, and really, and even about what the relationship is. Like I think we're past that. Like we have to like allow ourselves to be past that, you know, like really harsh racism. Like I think that tone is not productive, and it doesn't particularly build a cultural landscape as a country even, you know. I was like so privileged to do the ballet Going Home Star for the Royal Winnipeg Ballet. And that was so fortunate because the creators there at the ballet are the artistic director and the executive director, like fully, like gave me carte blanche to work with who I wanted to work with, you know, and to create that collaboration. And it was like beyond what we had ever hoped it would be. And I think that was, for me, a really important lesson, was that I think we can be greater than we've ever imagined we could be as a country. If we would allow ourselves to get past that, you know, this very harsh kind of lens. And I know as a producer, it's just, you know, okay, my dad, he's an elder, but I'm even becoming an elder now. You know, and it's really, I just think, I keep kind of trooping on, you know, like kind of hoping that, you know, something will change. And we have to keep saying this, we have to keep trying, because I really think that we need to get past this point where we think that we're like giving stuff up, where I think we can be creating like so much together, and we can create a really incredible like cultural landscape for this country, and I think it's to the benefit of us all. I really do, I really believe that. And I just, you know, finished a film, you know, which was based on Joseph Boyden's second novel, and Joseph has been through the ringer, you know, around this Indigenous identity politics, which, you know, I'm grateful my producers, my collaborators they didn't want to participate in it, and I was really grateful for that. And I was able to make the film, and you know, we were able to work up with the Moose Creek people and work in the language. And Edmund Matatawaban was part of our film, and you know, what a great opportunity like that. Again, I feel like if we can kind of like leave the old thinking at the door, you know, there's a lot of potential. So I really appreciate the question. I agree. And I don't know what the answer is, but, you know, there's, I think, a lot of us, you know, that are still trying. We're all still trying to do these things together, and it's really important.
Well, I think that when I worked in community development, worked with my own people, but also white people, and I like to use formula, written formula. Because, when you deal with a problem, the first step in that is to become aware of the problem. You know, and I think that's what Tina was talking about, that we need to become aware to talk about it. And that's what I'm trying to say. It's not as eloquent as my
Well, I think the other thing which is important, which comes out of what Tina is saying, is that there are a lot of Indigenous producers and filmmakers, and now I worked with Zach Kunu in the north, and Zach is extremely well known. And a few years ago there was a competition for Indigenous filmmakers to make films about Indigenous views on the environment.
Yes.
And Zach applied for it, and Zach was turned down.
Yes.
He was turned down, and in fact the group at Guelph University got the money. And so Zach came to a couple of friends of mine and myself and said, you know, let's write letters of protest. That was, I will confess, we were drinking beer. And he said, let's write a letter of protest, or each of us is going to write a letter of protest. We all agreed we were going to write letters of protest. Well, 3 beers later, we decided, to hell with that, we'll make our own movie.
Right.
And that the 3 white guys on the team would raise the money, and Zach would make the movie.
Yes.
And that's what we did.
Yes.
And it was probably one of the best pieces of work I've ever done.
Yes.
I didn't do anything, by the way. I did the translation.
That film has traveled the world, and about Indigenous perspectives on the environment.
Yeah.
And it was, and his work has become a reference point, I think, for Indigenous filmmakers. But again, who's the broadcaster that is like actually giving a broadcast license for Zacharias Kunuk? It's not CBC. It's not even APTN. It is like it's the Inuit Broadcast Association, you know, like society. And so again, it's like here is like a world-renowned, celebrated filmmaker making really incredible films. And even he's doing a that the Inuit Broadcasting Society has licensed, where it is going to be broadcast at the Venice Biennial in 2020 or something like that. So I mean, and so the world is embracing him. You know, internationally he's being embraced, but domestically he's still not. So, you know, it speaks to like exactly what you're saying there. You know, it's a real challenge.
Can you
And yet we
spell
have these
his
brilliant
last name for me?
K-U-N-U-K.
Also,
Zacharias, he did Achinarjuak, the fast runner. Yeah.
One of the criticisms, I suppose, and I think I've been one of the least outspoken critics of Indigenous entertainment, is that the Aboriginal people that are portrayed in these TV shows like Mohawk Girls, The Rez, and even North of 60, sometimes are more white than they are native. Do you know what I mean? Like, the portrayal seems to be what everyone expects kind of native people
Yes.
to be,
Yes.
or what they want them to be, and not what is real.
Right.
Right? And so a lot of Native people go, Native people don't talk like that, right? Native people don't do that, or that's not a part of our culture, right? But it is portrayed by Indigenous people as if it is part of our culture.
Right. So it's how the system works.
And it's very much like the residential schools, right? It's a continuation of that kind of mindset that we have to change these little natives, or these native people, into something that, you know, very much like a part of the society in which they live in, right? And so it seems to me to be kind of like a product of that as well.
So you have, you have broadcasters, right, which are, you know, Canadian broadcasters, and they're the ones that are,
Yeah.
you know, sort of set up the system. So it's, I think you're,
Yeah, like I want to respond to it. We're talking about the part of that though is like part of the problem with the challenge for Native people themselves is, you know, like is like that you have to allow yourself somewhere along the line to be different also. You know, like I'm said Tama, you know, the people who said, "Why, my name is Chugusiaso." You know, like they'll say to you, "Don't act like a white man. You're acting like a white man." You know. Well, that is because they're reflecting, you know, how they've been also conditioned, you know, to respond to the white person in that way, and injuring themselves, you know. So it's a difficult thing, and I think I pointed that out in my, that there's an equal and opposite reaction of, you know. And that's the same with, like, Tina was talking about indigenate, I can never say that word. Indigenate, you know, what they call it, the Indian police, you know. So it's like being an artist that have freedom. Well, we as people have to have freedom too. And the freedom works both ways. But the point that, the major point that Tina, you know, emphasizes is this fact that built into the culture of Canada and maybe other places is an attitude toward Indian people, you know, and it becomes very painfully obvious when you have things that happened in Saskatchewan where that Indian boy was killed, you know? And suddenly you see Saskatchewan as being the worst type of redneck society there is, you know? And that is because they're Indian, not because they stole somebody's, you know? And that's sort of an extreme example, but it nevertheless portrays that unawareness that we have in ourselves as a people, and I'm talking about Canadians per se, not the Indian portion.
Yeah, I always think that too, like one of the things that, you know, in terms of the arts and how, I mean, one of the struggles obviously is like moving forward and trying to, like, you know, trying to change the broadcasters and trying, you know, Indigenous producers trying to get their stuff out there. But on the other hand, and I always think, like, you know, this thing around the sort of indigeneity issue is that why are we making this such a big deal? Like, why don't we just, like, say, like, you know what, let's embrace it again and, like, see it as a positive thing. Like, if somebody's, like, you know, reconciling their family history with the fact that they have Indigenous blood, why don't we see that as a good thing? Rather than, like, so there is this weird culture that we have, like, in Canada, you know, it's just, like, almost like to, like, you know, police and try and pull things apart. Like, it's very destructive. And yet, on the other hand, I always think, you know, because we were actually we were just prepping to shoot in Moosonee, and there was Joseph Boyden's picture on, like, the Globe and Mail, you know, the weekend edition. And all I could think was, why don't they have Cindy Gladew's picture on there? Like, why aren't we talking about that as a country? Like, why aren't we talking about indigeneity? Like, as if it's a crime. Like, why aren't we talking about the real crimes? And, like, what's really happening? And then celebrating what we can, on the other hand, you know? Like, so there's this really weird gray area that we get stuck in. And it's not about the Cindy Gladue case or, you know, like these horrible, you know, injustices that continue to happen. Or it's not about celebrating what we can create together or who we are as Indigenous people, like the Zacharias Canucks, and how we could make our own arts, you know, moving forward. We stay in this weird gray area. And I think that's, like, that to me is more shocking as I get older. Like, I think, you know, like 26 years ago when we started North of 60, you would have thought it would be better in 25 years. But we're not. Like, we're kind of...
When I grew up and I finished high school and I went to university, tried to go to university for a couple of years, but dropped it. And I worked in the mines, and then I was in the Army, and I got out of the Army in 1957. And I went back to work in the North, and I'd been an artillery surveyor, and I was in the Canadian Army Survey Establishment. And I'd taken I knew quite a bit about surveying, but I didn't have any papers. But I'd not applied for a job here in Winnipeg at the Inco office. And the guy sent me up north, he said, "You go here," and I went there, and they sent me somewhere else. And I went into the Canadian exploration, Canadian nickel, and the boss there said, "Well, you're a surveyor and you'll be working with this guy." I said, "Yeah." He said, "What's your name?" I thought he knew my name, but I said, "Joe Keeper." He said, "Well, is Jack Keeper your brother?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You're from Norway House?" "Yeah." Oh, he said, "You don't have any papers?" I said, "No." I said, I got the diploma when I took surveying course in the artillery, and then I was with the Canadian Army Survey Establishment for a while. But he said, "Well, I don't know whether you can survey or not." He said, "I'll have to send you what was our chief surveyor for a couple of days to see if you know what you're talking about." And I went out and did that, and I did calculations, computations. After a couple of days, the guy said, "Well, obviously you know what you're doing." And then I became chief surveyor, or not chief surveyor, or in charge of a survey crew. And I used to get some guys come in there, the engineering students. And some of them were green, they hardly knew one end of it. You know, the later transit from didn't know anything at all. And I get one of Rodman, to teach them how. But I always asked them, I said, did you have to prove? You know, that not one of them was ever asked. And I thought, there's something to this, you know. And I'm sure this fellow who did it, I can't remember his name, he was a very fine man. And I'm sure that he wasn't aware of what he was asking. It was just something that people are conditioned to. And it's something that, you know, that's why I say we really have to look at each other very carefully. You know, myself, you know, to see how we best can change the system in which we live. Because Indigenous people are more and more a part of this country, more and more a part of Manitoba particularly. But yet you see how they're treated. I remember when I worked in the north, and I used to have most of the guys working with me were Indian people going from Cross Lake and Nelson House particularly. And several times the guy would come, and I had a guy who worked with me, his name was Bruce from Nelson House. He looked like a white man. They'd go to him before they'd come to me because they figured he was the guy charged. And that's part of the reaction, you know, of the general society to Indian people. And it's unfortunate for that. That's why I spoke like I did today. But it's worthwhile following up on, looking at ourselves.
It's helpful to get to know some Indigenous people who are willing to point out to you when you're doing that. Barbara Shimsky's very good at that.
Yeah, she's pretty good at that. Joe, when you were introduced tonight, you were introduced as an elder, and thank you for sharing your stories. And now Tina has inferred that she is looking to be an elder. I just wondered, is that a formal title? Or how's that
For me, it's an
happening?
age thing.
What's happening here?
Yeah, don't go down that road.
Yeah, that's my age. Yeah.
People ask me if I'm an elder. I said, well, I'm not sure. I'm an elder. I know I'm an old Indian.
Yeah, and for me, it's just an age thing.
Just an age
It's just like I'm
thing.
just getting up there and, you know.
I know, but when your dad's not telling all those stories, we're going to be telling those stories and keeping our feet to the fire. And
Oh, we have an older brother.
okay, all right. I see you passing.
Two older brothers.
Two older brothers. Yeah.
Actually, I appreciate Karen's question, because one of the concerns, Vince and I talked about this, one of the concerns we have is with the growing Indigenous population in urban areas, the kind of natural local community eldership model is sort of fractured. I mean, it's not there, I don't think, in the normal kind of way, and yet it's a key part, as far as I can see, key part of healthy Indigenous society. So how do we, not necessarily me, but I mean, any of us, how do we lay fertile ground for something to emerge in the urban setting that would fill that need?
Well, one of the things talking about culture, right? And history. When you talk about, you know, when you look at like the creeds and we've never been a nation. I mean, we've got group called the First Nation, but basically we've never been a nation. And most of it in Manitoba, we haven't even, like in the sort of the structures, we haven't even been tried. But we've been hunting groups, and we've developed the experiences and the practices, the wisdom and knowledge that allowed the Cree to exist in this very harsh country for millennia. I often wonder how they ever did without steel axes or cut a hole in the ice for fishing, so all these things, But they survived that way, and they did it because they developed systems and ways of doing things that made them, that were very, very, they didn't build, there were no built, great organizations built. Even the leadership, there were leaders in particular areas, but there was no political organization per se. And if you read the treaties, you read the treaties of Norway House. When they went into Norway House, there were people from Cross Lake there and other places, but there was no chief per se. What they said, well, you got to go away and you pick up the guy who's the chief. And that's what they did, and they signed the treaty giving away, hundreds of thousands of square miles of land, and that then became the document that had been used for, like other documents before that, under which the land has been taken over by the dominant society, by England, and Canada, etc., etc. All of these things are being done because of the political organization. Now, it's only recently that they've begun to organize in a political system, per se. Even the first treaties where the chief of the council was appointed, they had an Indian agent there that sort of administered everything that was done. But yet the people themselves were being traveled, so managed to exist and do fairly well because it didn't change their system. But suddenly, about 50 years prior, post World War II, they changed the system. They brought in child allowance, the necessity to have education, such things, and forced them to live in one community. They may have come to that anyway because the whole national system forced them into little towns. But they had never lived in little towns before that. Some of them had lived, but most of the time they would spend in what they call a resource area. Like Split Lake, 80,000 acres. Norway House, 100,000 acres. And that's where they would spend most of the time living as hunting groups. So when you start talking about the type of organization, that we need as a people to exist in Canada and to become political, have political strength, then we have to learn these things. The British and the others have had thousands of years. Like the British had the Magna Carta, and then they had the bloody wars for 300 or 400 years before they became, self-governing bodies. So you've got to give us a little time.
True.
So it's difficult, it's a very difficult thing, and I think sometimes you grab onto these things, and I can think of many of our reserves in northern Manitoba and elsewhere, where there's a population explosion, and there's no economic base for the people. And then they become rural getaways. You have crime and drugs and all of these things. When I grew up as a boy at Norway House, there was never, I remember one guy being killed, but he had drowned somehow, long for all the years, and they said he'd been killed. But there was never that there was no crime per se. But now it's a dangerous place. So it's not an easy world for Indigenous people.
I was just wondering, I did a quick Amazon search on Norway House, And to the best of Amazon's knowledge, there is no written history of Norway House. And so I was wondering, for the benefit of my children, and particularly my grandchildren, is there any public or private funds, TRC funds, being put into creating written history of places like Norway House?
You're right, there's no written history. There's some short, but there's no real history. And you know, I've been talking about writing something, but not as a historian, but there is a real lack of history of the Cree in the north, you know, like a comprehensive study. Like, even for Manitoba itself. The last comprehensive study that was done of Indian people in Manitoba was done in 1958. It was done by the government at that time. And at that time, there was the document of Indian and Indian blood. At that time, they figured that using the figures that were available in the census of 1869-70, when Manitoba became a province, where there were about 5,000 Métis, French-speaking mixed blood people, Métis, and 5,000 English-speaking, and then there were about 1,500. There were some Indians, and then there were some white people. But using those figures, there should have been, like, for people of Indian blood in Manitoba, by the time that study was done, just by people intermarrying and population, there should have been an approximation of 1 in 4 people in Manitoba have some Indian blood in them, you know. And you find out today that more and more people are finding out that they have Indian blood in them, because it becomes sort of a style. But at that time, and like there was, just to indicate this, the stigma that they've been attached to being Indian, there was, in the 1944 census, or census 1940s, when there were 10 or 11,000 people of mixed blood in 1869, in the census of 1945, there were 8,000. So a lot of them disappeared somewhere. But then, beginning to appear again. But I mean, this was something that was this whole matter of how people felt about being Indian. You know, it was wrong to be Indian. You know, it was racial prejudice.
I think, Simon, if you won't find anything on Amazon, but if you look at something like the University of Manitoba Theses, you'll find histories of Norway House. The only reason I know that is I had a graduate student from Norway House who did one a few years ago. So there is stuff around, but it's not in the buy a book off the shelf literature. It's in the tucked away in very strange corners. Sorry, Keith.
Well, I was going to say too that Norway House, you know, as a First Nation, you know, as First Nations have been, they've been like, you know, just swamped with having to do reports on all their funding, and they have to do funding for everything. So when you look at Indian Affairs, there's money that would run across 17 federal departments that's flowing through Indian Affairs that First Nations have to deal with in their reporting. Also, too, I mean, the idea of a written history is very new to us, you know, new within our culture. So there hasn't been a lot of time or opportunity to like do that kind of work. And so, as you'll see, it's like it's students. You know, you'll find somebody's PhD on Treaty 5 or something, and or artists that are doing work. But you know, I know that the community is now talking about, you know, creating some sort of comprehensive history and, you know, cultural language, you know, for like whether it's in images or within the curriculum, you know, for the schools and for the community. And again, it's like there's a lot of steps that have had to be made in a very short period of time, and and that are outside of our, traditional culture, so.
Talk about the history, there's a history done by an anthropologist called Lippman. It's called Swamp Creek. But he writes a thing in English letters. He doesn't use the Swampy Cree dialect when he talks about them. He uses the dialect of the Wood Cree, that's what they call Stony Cree, the TA's dialect, the Hissewak. We use the N dialect. So, I've tried to get a hold of it a few times and wondered where he did his basic research. But it's a book that I'm sure in the bookstore here.
There might be a copy in my office, which you can have if you want it.
Go ahead, Joy.
I had one thing in mind at first, but then Tina, you said something that made me think of something else. And you talked about finding ways to convey this history and recognizing there's so many different ways and maybe images. And that made me think of my experience at the ballet. Because I try to read what I can, and I liked to think that through my reading I was getting a sense of what this history is and what these experiences have been. But when I attended that ballet production, I was drawn into that story in a way that nothing else was able to accomplish. And I think that's something important. But there's many different ways of remembering, recalling, retelling history. But initially what I just wanted to share, I heard something interesting and maybe hopeful on CBC radio on my way as I was driving today. And out of the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action, education, a really big priority. And apparently Manitoba is leading the way.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was just at the TRC thing today.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.